Thank you for attending How PagerDuty Achieved End-to-End Visibility with Splunk and AWS. My name is Miles Hosford. I am a Security Solutions Architect at AWS, and I will be your host and moderator for today's webinar. Today I am joined by Richard Smith of Splunk, David Wall, and Arab Chakrabarti of PagerDuty. In today's webinar, we will be looking at how PagerDuty utilizes Splunk to create a secure and compliant operating environment on top of AWS Cloud. We will take a deep dive into the PagerDuty success story and an overview of the Splunk solutions featured throughout. We will close with a Q&A discussion. Feel free to submit your questions in the question pane and we will address them at the end of the webinar. Today's learning objectives, we will look at how to proactively measure security and prevent breaches using Splunk and AWS security services. We will discover how Splunk's analytic-driven approach to security makes it easy to gain simplified end-to-end visibility across your AWS and hybrid environment and to prevent or resolve threats. Security at AWS is our top priority. Nothing is more important to us than protecting your data. That is why we listen closely to our customers to offer both a secure cloud computing environment and innovative security services that satisfy the security and compliance needs of the most risk-sensitive organizations. With AWS, you know where your data is stored, who is accessing it, and what resources your organization is consuming at any given moment. Fine-grained identity and access controls combined with near real-time security information ensure that the right resources have access to the right data at all times, regardless of where in the world your information is stored. AWS is vigilant about your privacy. You always own your own data, including the ability to encrypt it, move it, and manage retention. We provide tools that allow you to easily encrypt your data in transit and at rest to help ensure that only authorized users can access it. These tools also give you the control you need to comply with regional and local data privacy laws and regulations. The design of our global infrastructure allows you to retain complete control over the regions in which your data is physically located, helping you meet data residency requirements. When customers use AWS, they operate in a shared security model, and we like to call this where AWS is responsible for security of the cloud, and customers are responsible for security in the cloud. As I mentioned, security and compliance is a shared responsibility. This shared model can help relieve customers' operational burden as AWS operates, manages, and controls the components from the host operating system and virtualization layer down to the physical security of the facilities in which the service operates. The customer assumes responsibility and management of the guest operating system, including updates and security patches, other associated application software, as well as the configuration of the AWS-provided group firewall. The AWS infrastructure is protected by extensive network and security monitoring systems. One of our services, AWS CloudTrail, allows customers to monitor and record all API activity that happens within their account. For example, if a customer was to create or destroy a database, create or destroy an encryption key, or even change a firewall known as security groups, all of this activity is logged via API calls in the CloudTrail service. Amazon Inspector is a service that allows customers to perform vulnerability assessments on their servers and of their application software to identify misconfigurations or vulnerabilities in their deployments. The AWS cloud infrastructure is built around regions and availability zones, or AZs. A region is a physical location in the world where we have multiple availability zones. Availability zones consist of one or more discrete data centers, each with redundant power, networking, and connectivity, housed in separate facilities. These availability zones offer you the ability to operate production applications and databases which are more highly available, fault-tolerant, and scalable than would be possible from a single data center. The AWS cloud operates 44 availability zones within 16 geographic regions around the world. AWS can be integrated with your existing resources. From an identity and access management perspective, AWS has a native service called AWS IAM, which allows you to create users, groups, and assign them roles and permissions. For customers that have an existing Active Directory or on-premise identity provider, you have the ability to federate your users and implement an identity provider that you've already created. You can use dedicated connections as a secure, low-latency extension of your data center. We also provide you the ability to provide and manage your own encryption keys if you choose. AWS regularly achieves third-party validation for thousands of global compliance requirements that we continually monitor to help you meet security and compliance standards for finance, retail, healthcare, government, and beyond. You inherit many security controls operated by AWS, which strengthens your own compliance and certification programs, at the same time lowering your cost to maintain and run your specific security assurance requirements. Examples of these controls include internationally recognized security best practices and certifications such as ISO 27001, SOC 1 and 2, and PCI DSS. I will now hand you over to Arab Chakrabarti of PagerDuty to talk you through the specific use case and their implementation of Splunk.
All right, thanks so much, Miles, for the intro there. Hi, folks. My name is Arub Chakrabarti, Director of Engineering from PagerDuty. I'm also joined by David Wall here from PagerDuty as well. So a quick glance, PagerDuty is the leading digital operations management platform, and we provide incident resolution services to our customers. PagerDuty helps customers worldwide manage their digital businesses effectively, whether you are managing a single website serving up ads for your own personal blog, or a major e-commerce website where you're making tens of thousands of dollars per minute. PagerDuty is based out of San Francisco with offices in Sydney, London, and Toronto. And we're completely cloud-based and cloud-native. Our service leverages cloud providers such as Amazon Web Services, and we get to leverage the AWS platform and services for achieving high reliability and scalability for our needs. PagerDuty has over 9,000 customers, including over half of the Fortune 100, and we also provide free trials. So if you're interested in signing up, please head over to PagerDuty.com, and you can see how we're helping companies manage over 250,000 incidents per day via 200+ native integrations. So diving a little bit deeper into PagerDuty's security challenge, from a security standpoint, there are a couple of problems that we are trying to solve. The first one was around monitoring and triaging threats. Like any other digital business that's constantly under attack, you need to remain vigilant in making sure that you have visibility into those attacks and making sure that you're mitigating and fixing those problems as quickly as possible. At the same time, we also want to maintain our existing security posture. Internally and externally, we have compliance requirements that we need to commit to. And one way to do that is to make sure that as you set up these compliance requirements that you don't regress. And that's also where we were looking at Splunk to help us solve this issue. Another bit for our security was trying to mitigate risk and understanding as we are releasing new functionality or new services to our customer, what kind of risk was that creating for our business? From more of an operational and availability standpoint, we want to ensure optimal customer experience and minimize any service interruptions to our customers. As we're trying to deploy and innovate as often as we can for our customers, we need to do that with minimal downtime. We also want to meet operational analysis needs when something does go wrong. We can't rely on tools that take days to get us answers. We need that data within seconds. And at PagerDuty, we had an existing logging solution in place before that was able to output data, but quite frankly, was not able to answer our questions, and it was not able to scale to meet our growing business needs as we were growing as a successful business. So why did we end up going with Splunk? PagerDuty decided to adopt Splunk Cloud running on top of AWS for a few reasons. The first was to expedite and speed up incident investigations and response times. We were able to take queries that used to take minutes or even hours down to seconds. We were able to provide our analysts with rich contextual information such that they were able to make better decisions. As a company, we've very much bought into this idea that everyone who's deploying and generating software for our customers should be on call, very much in this DevOps or distributed operations manner. And for us, it's very important that we empower every single one of our engineers to make the best decisions possible when they need to. Another piece, as I mentioned earlier, is to help us mitigate risk. Like I said, we deploy tens of times a day, hundreds of times a month, and we want to make sure that as we're innovating on behalf of our customers, that we're also managing and mitigating risk by providing good visibility via tools like Splunk. Like I said, we also want to make sure that we are providing a highly available service we refer to as continuous availability at PagerDuty, and Splunk running on top of AWS helps us support that as well. As our customer base grows, as we were becoming a more successful business, we were adding more and more data into our logging solution, and Splunk has been able to scale with us perfectly over the last couple years. And finally, while this was not the main driver, we ended up actually reducing our cost by 30% over our previous solution. While this was not our main driver for it, it certainly made it easier to sell to my finance team and get more folks within the company on board. So going a little bit deeper into a few more areas here, from an enterprise-wide visibility and high availability standpoint, we first looked at security. The first was making sure that as a product that when we have any security challenges or any issues that come up, we're able to quickly pinpoint where the problem is. If we're under attack from someone, we want to be able to tell exactly where they're coming from and how we can easily mitigate that attack as well. From a compliance standpoint, we want to make sure that as we were setting up compliance requirements internally at the company, that we were never regressing. And one way that we go about doing that is leveraging Splunk's daily searches and real-time searches across a range of data sources that we have to make sure that we're not regressing. And because this is all automated, there's no manual intervention. I don't have a team of analysts sitting there running these searches or manually doing this work. Splunk takes care of all of this for us. Diving a little bit deeper into the operations, we want to be one of the most highly available services in the world. And in order to do that, you have to have real-time, down to the second visibility into what's going on within your environment and infrastructure. And from an application development, like I said, we're big believers in the DevOps movement and running engineering teams as distributed operations teams. And what that means is each and every individual engineering team is on call for their services. And when something does go wrong, they need to be able to tell within seconds, not minutes, not hours, what's going wrong. And with Splunk, we're able to provide that tooling and that visibility and empowerment to our engineers such that we can really subscribe to this idea of you build it, you own it, you operate it successfully. So going a little bit deeper into security and compliance, our prior solution provided data, but quite frankly, not a lot of answers to the questions that we had. We were able to retrieve raw log data, we were able to make very basic searches, but anytime we were trying to understand what was actually happening from a customer standpoint, we weren't able to answer any of those questions. When we brought Splunk in, we made our security program more effective, and quite frankly, it was easier to run. Instead of having to employ tens of analysts to run these searches, Splunk is able to handle a lot of this for us. Because we're able to set up threshold-based alerts, we're able to minimize a lot of the alert fatigue and prioritize the investigations that we need to. With Splunk, we're able to set up very clever alerting such that we can chain together a bunch of events and then alert on that, as opposed to taking a more simplistic approach and alerting on each of these simple events. After we have those alerts, though, we also leverage our dashboards to quickly pinpoint anomalies that warrant further investigation. Additionally, we also use these dashboards to understand how is our business doing at any given point in time. After we brought in Splunk, we were also able to reduce the reliance on point solutions that we had, and we were able to leverage the Splunk dataset even more. As we were able to move more and more data into Splunk, we were able to get more and more value out of that data because we were able to query across more disparate datasets. And lastly, we also connected the AWS app into Splunk such that we were able to manage any change management and change tracking happening in our AWS account in Splunk. So for example, because we're ingesting all these CloudTrail events from AWS into Splunk, I can tell at any moment when an engineer of ours has spun up a new server, decided to create a new database, decided to set up a new Redshift cluster, what have you, and we can do that in a compliant way such that we have real-time visibility into all these changes, but we're able to do this without getting in the engineer's way and setting up approval change or other gates that would slow them down. Going a little bit deeper into how we help support our engineering teams and distributed operations at the company, we're able to deliver new products securely with speed and agility. And quite frankly, the way that we do that is being able to maintain auditability of what goes on in our environment and infrastructure, leveraging Splunk. We're able to look at historical trends by leveraging Splunk's data storage time and help teams understand where they have to invest their time and energy. Teams are able to do this on their own, where they can look at their own error rates, their own availability measurements, and decide whether it's good enough for them and decide where they want to spend their time and energy as a team. as opposed to being centrally managed by a central operations team or a centralized logging team. And lastly, we're able to keep our engineering teams focused on running the business and providing customer value. And this is important to us because as our engineers have become more and more productive using Splunk, they're able to worry about less and less about having to run a logging system. From my perspective, I'm able to reduce the amount of tools maintenance that my engineering teams have to worry about and instead focus on running the business and providing customer value for PagerDuty customers. So going beyond the engineering and security use cases that I've described here, we've also started leveraging Splunk for other areas of the business as well. Our finance team, for example, is using Splunk for some visibility into customer usage trends. So they're actually looking at it as a leading indicator of things like account health, such that if there's something wrong with an account, we can proactively reach out as opposed to having to react to an account problem. We also have our executives and our product management teams using Splunk for real-time visibility into overall business health. Our product managers in particular leverage Splunk to understand what is the performance of our product on a real-time basis so they can regularly see how their work is impacting the overall business health. This is incredibly important to us at PagerDuty as we believe that putting more and more people on call to manage our digital business is important internally. We believe this is also where the industry as a whole is heading, and hooking services like Splunk and AWS into PagerDuty really supports this. So why did we go with Splunk on AWS? The biggest reason, as I was explained before, was there was no infrastructure management or administration that we had to take care of. All we literally had to do was take our Splunk forwarder, install that on our host, and point it to Splunk Cloud. Because it's Splunk, we trust Splunk with the reliability that Splunk's had for decades of running their service, and quite frankly, it's a very hard reliability to achieve on other services. Splunk has been doing this for a very long time, and they know how to run large-scale Splunk installments in the cloud effectively. And as I said earlier, PagerDuty, we're a cloud-native company, and so for us, things like scalability, agility, flexibility, elasticity are incredibly important to us. We regularly spin up dozens of servers on a daily or weekly basis, and we don't want to have to negotiate with our downstream dependencies whether we can send more data or not. And Splunk Cloud allows us to do this easily and effectively without having to worry about it. So a quick recap of some of my talking points here. So PagerDuty, we deployed Splunk Cloud as our platform for operational visibility and triage across our entire business, from our IT and engineering teams to security and compliance. By leveraging Splunk Cloud, our engineering teams have a solution for monitoring and alerting, and we can dig deeper into the source of issues and resolve them quickly. And of course, we always use PagerDuty for this as well. We're able to ensure customer satisfaction for our highly available cloud service as we are innovating on our customers on a regular basis. We're also able to reduce IT and security incident resolution time from hours to minutes and seconds because we're able to accomplish and complete our queries so quickly using Splunk. And lastly, it's like I said earlier, this wasn't the primary driver, but it definitely was a nice to have. We realized 30% cost savings over our prior service. This made it a lot easier to convince my finance team that this was the right solution for us, and at the same time convince other business stakeholders that this was the right solution for us. So with that, I'll hand over to Neil over from Splunk.
Great, thanks, Arup. So by way of introduction, my name is Neil Gow. I'm a technical services manager for Splunk, based here in Sydney in Australia. So having heard about from Arup about what PagerDuty are doing with Splunk, I just wanted to spend a little time to cover a bit more about why Splunk can be important for those of you getting started on your cloud journey or at the point of looking for better ways to secure your cloud environment. As was pointed out by Miles, you recall that AWS secures the cloud, and you are responsible for what's in or on that cloud instance. And we believe here at Splunk, we can help you to see within the cloud with an analytics-driven security approach, principally to help you secure and protect what's valuable to you and your business. So how do we do that? Splunk makes data visible, accessible, and valuable to everyone in the organization. We believe irrespective of the size, speed, or structure of that data. It's a platform for machine data, collecting all of this data in one place so you can search, analyze, visualize, and report on it to solve a breadth of use cases for security, IT, and the business. And I'll be discussing a little bit more of this later on in my presentation. Really critically, you can collect data from anywhere, whatever the structure. If you can interpret it visually, you can ingest it into Splunk. And we do that by employing universal forwarding and indexing technology to help you with that process. Now, this technology has a very small footprint with little or no impact on your systems. And there's the ability to search and analyze across all your data with powerful search and critical schema on-the-fly technology. Now, what this on-the-fly technology means that you do not have to deploy a database or worry about pulling a predetermined schema. So this is, you don't have to decide what questions you want answers for up front. You load the data and you have freedom to ask a set of questions now, a different set in the future, or historically looking at the reservoir of data you've collected, any different sort of questions. And this is a key differentiator, and I'll be touching on it again as we go through. But again, the schema on the fly process is very resource efficient and leaves little or no impact on your IT resources. And having ingested it, we can finally deliver rapid real-time insights from this machine data to IT and security personnel through a powerful UI and a number of bespoke dashboards, or customized or standardized ones. Splunk gives you this flexible interface that allows you to do free-form search to investigate incidents. Information can be correlated from across your entire environment, whether it's on-premise or in the cloud. You can conduct investigations from a single pane of glass and correlate this information based on the wide range of relevant data fields, be they timestamp, user ID, IP address, or whatever is relevant to the questions you need answers for. Practically anything to get a full view of what is or what's happening in your app or in your infrastructure. Once you find it and remediate it, an incident, you can set up alerts, but more important, just not alerts, but smart threshold-based alerts, critical for minimizing alert fatigue, the new scourge of the IT systems where individuals are bombarded for every second of their operating day with alerts. What we're actually trying to do is focus on removing the noise so that individuals can spend their time on incidents that really matter and are impactful for the organization. You want to focus your analyst investigations on incidents and assets that are most important. The question you would want to ask is, would you rather have your analyst spending time updating antivirus endpoints or investigating unusual access to your critical and confidential customer databases? I expect it will probably be the latter, and this is where Splunk can help. We take that data and give the user answers, but not just clear answers, but they give them in the context that allows you to prioritize those investigations, as well as giving the ability to build dashboards that you need to understand all important trends, highlight anomalous activities at a glance, or provide compliance, audit, and other reporting to your leadership board, partners, or your other key stakeholders in your business processes. These can be applied across activities or capabilities and workflows across any number of security use cases. And we have a sample of 6 of these here. As I've mentioned, Splunk is a security analysis platform and can address a wide range of threats around detection and response, malware phishing, ransomware fraud, insider threats. Also, you've been able to leverage machine learning. We can get predictive and try and get ahead of the curve to identify user behavior that may be contrary to the profiles you need for good behavior within your organization. If you have or you want a SIEM, Splunk is more flexible than your traditional solutions. very often, many of them aligned to a rigid relational database structure. So irrespective of this, we can complement or even replace existing SIEM deployments, principally to address more complex security cases. Yeah. The threats today basically typically don't reside in historical security data. Yeah. The threat footprint exists in the data outside those sources that the classic SIEM would actually use. So expanding the platform to ingest and interrogate those sources is key to keeping abreast of the latest threats from cyber criminals. So having talked about that, let's talk about how Splunk can address security questions directly relating to AWS. As mentioned, AWS secures the cloud at the bottom, but you're responsible for securing what's in the cloud, and this is where we believe Splunk can differentiate and provide a significant amount of help for new and existing users. You choose the best of breed providers for threat intelligence, identity and access management, security and authentication. Across this ecosystem of security partners, the odds are that Splunk already has an app or a partnership with those solutions to help you get data into the Splunk platform and provides pre-packaged searches, alerts and dashboards and reports to help you get immediate value from that source. It's about collapsing the time to value. It's about not recreating the wheel. It's taking publicly available IP on the most effective way of building out a critical security posture that is aligned to the needs of your organization and doing that in the most effective time frame. While saying that, Splunk continues to deliver these use case based apps, including our recently launched Splunk Insights for ransomware. And most importantly, the vast majority of these are available for free download and installation within your AWS Splunk environment and are available for free on Splunkbase, our accessible database. So the question is, having got visibility into everything that's on the cloud with Splunk, what about your AWS environment itself? As Arut mentioned, the Splunk app for AWS gives you visibility across usage, topology, security, timeline billing, and other valuable insights to drive and support your key business processes. Some of the security-related use cases we can address include a view into user activity, full audit trails, as well as the ability to detect anomalous behavior. We get user, VPC, authentication, and other security-relevant data from AWS, so you can get a view of your full security posture. We can capture changes and adds and deletes to inventory and config to automatically create a topology view and then continuously monitor the changes in your environment for security and compliance reporting. For network security, we capture DPC flow log data, and that flow data provides that additional context and richness that you need to provide for an effective security lens. Irrespective if you have some services on-premise, Splunk gives you complete visibility across your cloud and on-premise environments. So you do have that complete view of your security posture, as well as the ability to conduct comprehensive investigations and analysis utilizing all your machine data. And customers like PagerDuty, as you've heard, use Splunk to address these needs on an everyday basis. But as well as this static data as well, the app gives the ability to present it dynamically in many effective, engaging ways that can be tailored for the user. For example, Splunk looks at your inventory and configuration data to create a topology view such as this, which is dynamically aligned and refreshed as your environment changes. It's the big picture of all your EC2 assets across all of your accounts and regions and provides a picture of how everything is connected in real time. even to the point of being able to play back in history to see how that environment has changed. This is a helpful way to visualize where your assets are and how they are connected to each other. So for example, if there are systems that are not attached to a VPC, this could well be a violation of corporate policy, and you'll be able to flag it and react and resolve it in a time frame that reduces and hopefully minimizes the threat to your organization. As you can see on the left, you can drill down by using this legend to turn on and off objects such as security groups. Drill down into what ports and protocols are open on your systems, or for deeper dives into the EBS volumes that you're running, and much, much more. This is a greatly effective view and way of ensuring overall compliance and security postures within your organization. The topology view also has a few layers you can activate or deactivate, so you can easily see which instances have the most network traffic, or are using the most CPU, have the highest cost, and so on. Even within the billing module, where you have the ability to predict and do what-if scenarios to understand and build out the most appropriate environments to manage your Splunk within AWS. We also support details around Amazon Inspector, as Miles talked about. So why do we believe this is important to you in a security context? We can expect certain VPCs to have certain levels of traffic, and with the inspector and this view, you can find anomalous patterns to investigate further. As an example, if we drill into an EC2 instance, we get details such as its CPU usage, disk usage, but also information on the AWS inspector results and VPC flow details, which you can drill into. Again, this matters because on an individual basis, we can see where we might need to update patches, ensure compliance with the policies, or what activity might be suspicious. And because Splunk is great at time series data, we can always use this topology view to identify config creep. There is a number of built-in dashboards within the app. And if we look at specifically two with regard to VPC flow analysis, we've got flow log for security analysis and flow logs for traffic analysis as well. So if we look briefly at the security analysis view you're seeing on the screen now, you have your standard accept versus reject trends over time, as well as the top values of rejections by ports and addresses lower down. These are a great starting point to look through potential anomalies or unexpected results, such as a very high ratio of rejections to accept or an uncommon port access request. The power of Splunk and its SPL language means that you can use statistical commands to understand if something is, say, 4 times the standard deviation of normal. So you can trigger an alert based on something that is highly anomalous and aligns to what these statistical commands are figuring out. This is an example of how analytics-driven security can help you prioritize your security investigations. From the dashboard itself, you can also click on any row and the results to drill down into the trend lines. Here you should be able to see at the bottom of the screen. However, these are just a few of the practical applications of Splunk to help you secure what's in the cloud. As you can see, these capabilities have been widely acknowledged by a number of expert third parties such as Gartner and IDC and Forrester. For example, Splunk has been recognized in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for its proven value over the last 4 years as a leader in the SIEM market. The Splunk footprint is extensive. At the last count, we've got thousands of global customers, and we believe at least 7,000 of these are using Splunk just for security and compliance, and over 14,000 customers are using Splunk for broader use cases. These customers cover all size and verticals, including SMBs, and span multiple geographies. Finally, you can use Splunk beyond just security for a whole range of use cases. Many of our initial customers come to Splunk to solve a specific problem over, say, IT operations, or as I shared with you today, security and compliance. But having resolved those issues within an extremely short time to value, they can then leverage their existing relationship to start asking questions and solving other big business pain points in other areas of the organization. For example, application management. The ability to get the most from your IT investment, to understand how those software and applications are supporting your key business processes. IT operations, the legacy use case from Splunk and the genesis of the whole platform itself. Anecdotally, of those customer base, we see up to a 90% improvement or reduction in the time to investigate and resolve critical IT operations. For example, Home Depot in the US reduced their Sev 1 and Sev 2 instance by as much as 43%. And NPR improved API performance by as much as 50% by splunking their IT operations scenario. We've talked briefly about security and compliance and fraud. This is extensive on there and specifically how it relates to AWS. But what about business analytics? Splunk is not a data prison. There is, with its REST APIs and SDKs, there is a bidirectionality within the structured world to merge structured data from CRMs, data warehouses, or ERPs to provide business context to enrich the answers that are being provided. For example, Dunkin' Donuts is able to leverage this capability to manage their supply chain and their product sales effectively. DevOps or Agile. Splunk is very much the engine that stitches together the DevOps chain, which may represent as many as 20 individual products, many of them open source. So for example, Tesco shortened development time by as much as 30%. White Pages achieved an 88% reduction in their DevOps reporting time, and NBC increased release cycles by 8x with no additional staff. And finally, industrial data collection. The growth of the mobile devices and the sensors and the smart devices everywhere. We see a proliferation of those from both the retail and the industrial perspective, and either seeing greater use of those in the addition of smart city and smart transport, and most importantly, the smart soldier or smart first responder, where we can actually take sensor and machine data right to the edge down to the individual and mash that up to make the most effective use of those resources while ensuring the duty of care is delivered to those key individuals while they undertake the dangerous and risky tasks that they do. So as you can see across those value groups, once the data's in, it gives individuals the ability to consistently ask different questions at any point in time. And it's this value proposition of different people asking different questions, but all on the same data, is what we believe is a key differentiator of the platform. So what next? How can I actually start to increase or even begin my Splunk experience? There's a number of ways we can do this. There's a free online experience where you can check out Splunk for yourself. It's an AWS instance that's preloaded with data, and there's videos and documentation that will walk you through incident detection and scoping exercises. Alternatively, you can purchase Splunk Cloud on AWS Marketplace. You can load your own data, and then you'll get a better sense of your own security posture. Outside of the sandbox and the download, we all can see there's more details around its availability on the marketplace itself, including AMIs. There's a number of ways for you to basically getting started with Splunk or increase your Splunk footprint to ultimately start asking different questions by different people, but all on different data in its own right. So at this point, that's the end of my presentation. So now I'd like to hand back to Miles onto the next stage, onto the Q&A stage. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Neil. Both Arup and Neil, that was very insightful and informative for the participants of the webinar. Some very insightful data points shared there. So we've got a couple of questions coming in from the live Q&A at the moment, and we'll get started with a question for Neil at Splunk. And how is Splunk different from CloudTrail or CloudWatch inside AWS?
Sorry, Miles, could you just repeat that question?
Yes, sure. So the question is basically around how Splunk is different from native services of AWS like CloudTrail or CloudWatch.
Yeah, it's around basically the ability to actually take one data source and correlate it against multiple other ones on that site. So the CloudTrail itself is a very rich data source. What we're actually trying to do is take that and bring in other data sources and to correlate those informations to give you different insight and be able to put different questions into different sort of perspectives.
Okay, great. And we have a question around pricing model. So the question is, do we pay for keeping data in both Splunk and our own systems? So I guess the heart of the question is around the pricing model.
Yeah, the pricing model for Splunk in its own right is typically data ingested over a 24-hour period. You know, some organizations will all be within Splunk in the cloud, and you can actually also choose the retention period that you actually want to hold that, which is typically related to, you know, the business problems you're actually trying to get answers for as well. So that tends to, you know, but once that data is loaded into Splunk, basically that's it. There is no additional charges on top of that.
Okay, great. And a question around how to actually get data into Splunk in the first place. So what are the options available to customers to actually ingest data from?
There is a wide range of options in its own right. So typically the cloud scenario is that, you know, you can individually take those data sources and open up a number of ports, or what we typically do would load what we call as a heavy forwarder. So we would aggregate, we'd take the data to a central source, store it and aggregate it, and then basically push it up to the cloud itself. But that aggregation process is supported. I mentioned universal forwarders, a very light and lean agent that will sit. There's that. We can also read from ports. We can read from flat files in its own right. We can actually read straight off the wire using stream capability. And a very popular one is to use an HTTP event collector, where that event collector is embedded in certain systems, particularly where they don't have a hardware footprint that we can actually do, and we'll forward the information in there, as well as we support a lot of other systems that will exfiltrate data using an API. So typically that, you know, will cover virtually every combination or permutation that our customers find about getting data into Splunk.
Okay, thanks for that. And this is quite an interesting question. So the question is, what methods do you have to integrate with VPC flow logs? And just before you jump into the answer, just for the sake of everyone else on the call, VPC flow logs is a service as part of AWS that allows customers to monitor the network traffic flow within their environment. So yeah, if you could just discuss the options available around flow logs.
Yeah, typically around that, as part of the deployment, we have what we call a technical add-on as well as the app itself. So it's typically, part of the sort of deployment is a little bit two-step. So what you're seeing in the app itself is the sort of the visualization of that. But there is a component called a technical add-on as well that's part of the solution that provides that sort of the integration from Amazon around those flow logs.
Okay, thank you. And a question, I know you mentioned it during your session, Neil, but there's a couple of questions around the ability for customers to have demos or trials and access to AWS to have a play around. So what's the options available there?
Yeah, there's a number of options. We do have through AWS a sandpit on that option, which is 7 days, which is truly available. It's the full version that they have to get to do that. One of the other options, there are some AMIs available on the AWS marketplace they can actually take. Or the other option is to go onto Splunk.com, download the free use version, which is actually a full use version of Splunk, and actually deploy that in their AWS environment as well. So those are typically the sort of three ways that new users that can get an opportunity to sort of experiment and get started on Splunk.
Okay, thanks. A couple of questions here around the dashboard. So there's a couple of customers that want to know how many of the dashboards that you walk through are kind of out of the box and available straight away, and how many of them are custom built and require some modifications?
They're all out of the box in there. So there's typically a configuration. So behind this is a configuration screen, which will, depending on what data sources you're taking in terms of CloudWatch and CloudTrail, you basically, if that data is extent, you can configure it to be ingested into the platform. What we, and in total, it's probably at last count about 18 or 20 individual dashboards across both the operational, the security, and the billing and the analytics. What we find, at the end of the day, these are just searches that are expressed in SPL. Quite often, what some individuals do will just take those searches and fine-tune them, and copy and paste them, and potentially build up their own sort of dashboard as they mature into it. But pretty much what I showed is what you get out of the box.
Okay, thanks. We've got a couple of questions which are really interesting around kind of education, and are there any ways or free ways for people who are interested to kind of learn Splunk and kind of educate themselves around the use of Splunk?
Absolutely. So a couple of ones is that we've got an option where very recently we sort of split our Splunk certified power user training into two sections. So we now have a Splunk certified user, and we have now a Splunk certified power user. Now that certified user training is free to everybody. It's all online delivered, which is a very succinct, comprehensive way of actually getting a externally recognized qualification in terms of Splunk, which will give you pretty much on the basics to do that. There is also, within the environments, the cloud environments, within the AWS Marketplace, and within the Splunk hosted websites, such as docs, there's a rich tapestry of information that you can download looking for specific answers. And we also have a very, very vibrant Splunk community that are very active in supporting specific questions. So, and this is a community that's run entirely by non-Splunk users of the, or non-Splunk employee users of the system. And so a lot of people will post specific questions in there, and believe at the moment it's less than 10 minutes to get an answer to that. So there's different ways of doing it in terms of getting a generic footprint, a good grounding, moving to sort of specifics through the structured documentation, down to some very detailed technical assistance from a vibrant community.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that sounds great, and I think I'd encourage everybody on the call to take a look at that resources. There's a question around Splunk provides a nice dashboard for AWS services, and some firms utilize ITSM, ServiceNow as their ITSM platform. Yes. Is there any integration with ServiceNow?
We do. We have, in fact, we work with a number of customers. We've already, one of the apps that I talked about, so that basically pre-wrapped IP of reports, alerts, business rules, visualizations, and dashboards is freely available and produces a very powerful sort of integration combination between the two platforms. What we have an add-on. We also have a dashboard itself, and this allows bi-directional integration between the two platforms. So Splunk itself can do its correlation searches and create scenarios, and either create events or create incidents in ServiceNow that are passed through that integration. And conversely, those events can be correlated, alerts can actually generate in ServiceNow, and the particular incidents that enter them can actually be viewed bidirectionally sort of back in. And part of the integration gives a dashboard within the ServiceNow environment to understand where these incidents are actually occurring. So to all intents and purposes, think of Splunk basically as a registered ServiceNow user with all the availability of somebody sitting in front of the screen, and it's used very sort of successfully to harness the best of breed capabilities of both platforms.
Okay, awesome. And there's a question around, is Splunk an AMI or an Amazon machine image? So I guess the question is, what are the options around running Splunk yourself on a server, or the kind of the Splunk Cloud SaaS platform?
Yeah, it is. So, the Splunk Cloud basically is a SaaS platform in its own right. However, you can, if you're an existing AWS user, you can actually take use your own AMI in that environment in its own right. So if you have those sort of images, depending on the particular footprint and the adoption, from there, some customers don't want the sort of the resource overhead and everything else to manage that infrastructure themselves, so they want a completely outsourced solution. Other organizations want to take all the benefits and all the richness functionality that AWS delivers, but want to basically a bit more hands-on control of that environment, and it will sit in that spectrum.
Okay, and a question from one of the attendees there on how Splunk differentiates itself from a customer kind of rolling their own solution using an elk stack.
Okay, one of these differentiations is around, I think one of the key things is time to value, on there, and particularly around scalability. So what we've actually sort of seen with Splunk is the ability to download it, install it, start ingesting data, and basically building out dashboards and visualizations to solve business critical questions in a very, very short period of time. Classically, one of the challenges around open source solutions is not so much the licensing cost of the software, but it's the availability of the resources to build out. It's also, in terms of maintaining stability of the platform through various moving parts and different version levels, which is something that Splunk is a homogeneous platform. It's the proprietary nature of that allows us to remove a lot of the pains and burdens of maintaining version control. And typically as well is ability to scale seamlessly from gigabytes through to terabytes all the way up to petabytes, really without major re-architecture and being able to optimize that on the most effective and smallest technology footprint and not necessarily have to exponentially build out a storage and processing backend to support processing.
One of the questions that's come in at the moment is around Splunk, and what is the preferred way to authenticate AWS users to Splunk, Richard?
Thank you for that, Miles. Yeah, so we have a number of ways. Some of our customers, we use SAML through single sign-on, whether it's ADFS or Okta, one of those preferred technology partners, or we also support a security model inherence, where you can actually assign roles and privileges within the Splunk platform itself. So it's really a range of methods to suit all maturities and preferences for our customers.
Okay, thank you. And another question before I hand over to PagerDuty, how does Splunk Cloud work with an on-premises version of Splunk? Is there any integration or concerns or challenges that customers need to be aware of?
No, really, it's a very flexible solution. What we're trying to do is align those capabilities, whether a customer is cloud only, cloud first on there, and whether they're transitioning or want to hold a hybrid solution because there are certain data for security or certain other reasons who actually want to hold it. So we have a sort of seamless point of integration, what we call hybrid search, where from the user, the ability to access, analyze, correlate, and visualize that data is transparent, whether it's actually being held specifically within the cloud or if some elements on-premise. That might be a permanent solution, or it may be a transitionary sort of solution as they transition to a cloud-only scenario. What we're trying to do is do that in the most easily sort of effective way and make that change and deliver that capability in a transparent fashion for the end user.
Okay, thank you. Another question that we've just had is around AWS zones or availability of Splunk. So as I mentioned, AWS operates in a region and availability zone concept. For Splunk, which AWS zones is Splunk Cloud available?
It's in all the, for us in Australia, it's in the Sydney zone, but we pretty much aligned to the relevant zones for our customers across the region, particularly to address the important instance about where data is being sort of physically held.
Okay, thank you. And then to shift the gears a little bit, a question for PagerDuty. How quickly were you able to install and start using Splunk Cloud?
So at PagerDuty, because we leverage so much infrastructure automation, we were able to get Splunk Cloud up and running within a few weeks of starting it. And so for us, it was a matter of working with Splunk to understand what we need to do on our end. But once we understood that, it took us about a couple of weeks to get our entire infrastructure migrated over.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the participants of the webinar? Okay, here we go. What security classifications are available for Splunk Cloud or AWS for government clients?
Yeah, certainly for within the US, there is a government instance of that, which it sort of aligns to those sort of specific requirements.
Okay, so there's alignment to kind of like FedRAMP and government requirements. And what I would also say to the question is kind of both Splunk and AWS are certified across the most common industry or globally security standards like ISO 27001, SOC 1, SOC 2. So those reports are available to customers to kind of dive deeper on what security controls we both have internally. Okay, and question around threat intelligence. So for you, Richard, where does Splunk get threat intelligence? For example, botnet, IP addresses, etc.
All of the above, really, sort of on that. So pretty much within certain of the products, the threat intelligence framework will hook into the vast majority of the third-party ones. Certainly with our premium offering around enterprise security, those have been sort of pre-configured, but can be adaptable and also customizable based on the specific requirements of sort of a customer, depending on what they use and what their preference is and how that data has been presented for ingestion.
Okay, good stuff. And a question around how customers can kind of get started with a demo or having a look how it works. Is there a way that customers can get up and running fairly easily or take a look at how Splunk Cloud works?
Absolutely. So we offer a 7-day sandpit where customers or prospects can actually go in and sign on, along with guided videos and documentation around development some of those use cases from there. And then obviously depending on sort of the interest and everything else around, there is quite extensive community and documentation support through the assets that Splunk provides. But that's typically for a first instance. That's a great, effective, very timely way of getting your first experience with Splunk and what it can do to solve specific problems.
Thank you, everybody, for attending today's webinar. I invite you all to fill out the satisfaction survey after the webinar completes. As a reminder, you will receive an email within the next 2 to 3 days with a link to these slides on SlideShare and a recording of today's webinar. We want to thank you all very much for attending, and to our speakers, Neil and Arup from PagerDuty and Splunk. And if you have any other questions, please do not hesitate to reach out directly. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.